So thank you for joining me today, Katerina. I'm very grateful for you to give me this time. So I know that you must be incredibly busy working on such an interesting project. Please, could you give me a layman's summary of the GreenSCIES project in Islington and the technology that underpins it?
Yes, of course, Emma. So Green Skies really stands for Green Smart Community Integrated Energy System. It sounds complex, but is it essentially a new energy system for Islington residents and businesses. Um, so really, I'll give you a bit of an aim of the project before I go into the technology, because it really helps framing it. So the aim was to design a system that is capable of delivering low cost, clean energy to the local community, and to have the system copied elsewhere around the UK and have it constructed. So we always refer to these as the 5 Cs, which are clean, cost, community, copied, and constructed. So they help keep the vision clear in our minds. So Green Skies, what it does is it effectively integrates low carbon heat, power, and transport. And let's have a look at heat first because it really underpins the project. So in Green Skies, in the concept, heat is delivered from a source to people's homes by a network of underground pipes. And this is what is known as a district heating network. And Islington already has district heating in the borough, so they are well experienced with it. So what we did differently is we designed a low temperature network that is around 20 degrees. And this allows for heat recovery from a local source. So in this case, we were looking at recovering heat from a data center, but it could be another source. It could be a supermarket, it could be a canal, it could be the industry. So the source can vary depending on the local area. But data centers, they are in a way a perfect heat source because they require cooling 24/7 just to keep the servers cool and keep the internet running. And in the process, they reject, large amounts of heat into the atmosphere. This heat is just lost and helps heat our cities really in a way. And what we can do is we can capture that heat into our heat network and then upgrade it using a heat pump to raise the temperature to that required for space heating and hot water in people's homes. And heat pumps are powered by electricity, which can come from a renewable source. So we investigated adding solar photovoltaics on the roofs of the buildings that would be connected to the network. So this kind of covers let's say, the low carbon heat and power. And then the low carbon transport comes from adding electric vehicle charging points along the heat network route. And this is actually a very effective way of doing it because what is really costly in the whole system, well, one of the things that is costly is the trenching for fitting the heat network pipes. So just to give you an idea, in Islington is around £2,000 per meter. So by combining the pipes with electric vehicle charging cables in the same trench, we are reducing the cost, compared to doing it separately. So the Green Sky system is effectively replacing fossil fuels, such as natural gas that's used in conventional gas boilers and petrol and diesel vehicles, because we are replacing them with electric heat pumps and electric vehicles. And in doing so, the carbon emissions are reduced by 80% in the local area, and the air quality will improve too because we are displacing, again, petrol and diesel vehicles. So hopefully this gives you an idea what the system is about.
It sounds absolutely fantastic. I realised that I just launched straight into a question about GreenSCIES, and I forgot to ask you to introduce yourself. My apologies. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell me where you fit into the project?
Of course. So I'm a senior research fellow at London South Bank University. So I've been doing I'm part of the heating and cooling group, and we do research on anything from district heating to refrigeration and the cold chain. So anything to do with heating and cooling. And we were basically we were the project leaders for GreenSCIES.
Thank you.
Oh,
So
thanks.
this is such an ambitious project, and in particular because it necessitates the cooperation between so many different groups of people. So there's the researchers like yourself, the academic side, the local council, the people who live in the area, and some private companies, I understand. How do you get something like this off the ground? How do you start something which is so complicated?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a lot to personal connections in a way, people you know, but it all started back in 2019. So this is when we secured funding from Innovate UK to carry out a 6-month feasibility study in Islington. And back then, it was the university, Islington Council, and 5 other partners with expertise in heat networks, in design and modeling, smart controls, electrical vehicles, and community engagement, which is quite critical. So it was really a diverse group of people with a wide range of expertise. There was a lot of women in group. A lot of age diversity, and it was a very multicultural team. And the good thing is we hit it off from the start. So we were united by this common vision, and there was always this feeling about that we were creating something great, and we were effectively integrating innovation across different sectors to develop a smart system that was equitable. And back then I had just started working at the university, and I still remember describing my job as I'm working on the solutions for climate change. So, and I think that feeling, it was across the consortium. I mean, we always felt like we were more than the sum of the parts, if you know what I mean. And over time, the project evolved, so more partners joined the consortium. So we ended up with 15 partners, including 2 local authorities and small and large companies. So just for context, so GreenSCIES 1 developed a feasibility study in Islington. Then with GreenSCIES 2, we did the detailed design. And in GreenSCIES 3, we looked at replication. So how can we use this concept elsewhere? So we looked at different case studies around the UK. And, cooperation with all stakeholders, which include local authorities, the industry and business, local residents. This engagement and cooperation was key. And we had 3 partners in the consortium that were just looking at stakeholder engagement, because we realized how critical this was for the project to be successful, because it's not just about the technology, is about taking people on the journey with you. Yes, so this is how challenging it was. It was really interesting from the start, I must say.
It sounds wonderful. It must be such a relief to feel, as you say, that you're creating a solution to the climate crisis. Because one of the reasons why I started this podcast was because of feeling acute anxiety about what is happening in terms of climate change and the changes to our environment, and that there's very often a very bleak picture painted in the media. But to be part of a project that is actively working to solve so many problems, that must feel wonderful. I really admire it.
No, it really does. I still love working in this area. And it was maybe personally really exciting for me because I was working in the industry and I was working in refrigeration, which is a parallel sector. Somehow, look, heating is, it feels a bit different. It's different stakeholders. So I was coming to work in London at the university with all these different people from different backgrounds. It's quite energizing and exciting to work in this area, I must say. Yeah.
Wonderful. So I can imagine that there are many obstacles that come up when you're creating something so complex with so many different people involved. What are the major ones, and how did you overcome these obstacles?
Yes, with any complex project, there's always obstacles. But one big one is when we started GreenSCIES it was in March 2020, just when the pandemic started, and we were then locked at home for months on end. And luckily, we had just set up Microsoft Teams and we were able to move quickly to online meetings. But the consortium had just expanded, so there was people I hadn't met face to face for nearly the whole duration of the project. And this also delayed the engagement with the local residents. So we had planned to do all these engagement activities face to face, and we had to move online instead. But we designed really interesting workshops and people, and we organized them in the evenings so people could come. It worked out really well in the end. Um, and then, Islington, they were very supportive of the project, but there is a complexity associated with local authorities as you need to engage with different departments, need to engage with the energy, with planning, with housing, and also that brings a bit of complexity. And the council also had to do their due diligence on the project, checking the costs of the planned network. They had to approve the business case. They also had to apply for funding to build the network. So all this needs to be approved by local councillors. So it's a long process, from doing a feasibility study all the way to building the system. So we now have finished the project, and Islington is securing funding for the construction. So we also had to, at the same time, we were developing this project for the community in Islington, for the local council, but we also had to meet the goals of the funder, Innovate UK, for the research project. And initially we started, let's say, looking at a big area in Islington, but then we want to take this to construction, even though we only have funding for a detailed design. We had the end game inside. And but for Innovate UK, because we were focusing on a smaller area, they saw that as we were reducing the scope of the project. So we had to kind of rethink halfway through. So we end up designing a system in Islington, but within a smaller area, but then look at how we could decarbonize a much larger part of the borough. So we end up investigating 1/3 of the borough, looking at different buildings and how we could decarbonize them. So yes, different challenges in terms of scale, the meeting the goals of different stakeholders, which is, I guess, to be expected in a complex project like this.
It sounds like it needs a lot of patience. Would you agree?
It does, it does. But at the same time, it's exciting. A lot of the time is you are providing the same information, but you are framing it in a different way, depending of who you're talking to, whether you're talking to a local resident, a local business, the council, whether you're talking to government about the project. So it depends, because there's different benefits associated with each stakeholder.
Thank you. So, speaking of benefits, what are the benefits for the different groups involved? I can see some very obvious ones, but there may be some that I haven't considered.
Yes, a good question. I mean, there is a lot of benefits for all stakeholders involved. I mean, for local residents, is they get a local energy system that is decarbonized, and they get better air quality. And one thing we did that is relatively innovative is we explore the option for the community to invest in the GreenSCIES system, and that would give them a certain level of decision making. We're not talking about investing large amounts, maybe 1-2% of the total project value, really, but it still gives them that voice. And for Islington Council, this project really fits into their goals of becoming a net zero borough by 2030. I mean, GreenSCIES is effectively giving them a blueprint on how to get there. So it's definitely obvious benefits for them. They are in the system. We were connecting council-owned buildings. We looked at connecting a university, a theatre, and a few local businesses. So it's, again, different stakeholders, but for Islington residents in those council homes, they were getting cheaper energy, or the same price, let's say, energy, but low carbon. We also looked at buildings that are more difficult to decarbonize, such as Georgian homes, and we came up with different solutions for the different building archetypes. Let's say, and for energy companies, this is definitely a project that's investable. So we carried out soft market testing to see if companies would be interested in building and operating the system. Because normally you do have heat, power, and transport look at it completely separately. It's not necessarily the same companies that are involved. So we were interested if energy companies could come and take these on board, and if there was interest, and there was interest from 10 different companies, which is great. Yeah, so is the integrating of heat, power, and transport is really interesting in this project. But and for the data center, so that waste heat provider, I mean, fact that we would be recovering their waste heat improves their carbon metrics, and is a way for them to give back to the local community. And then there's benefits associated with employment to, build the network and operate it. I'm sure there is much more, actually. This is just the first ones that come to mind, actually.
Yeah, there are multiple levels of some different types. It's quite remarkable, really. So I understand that there's a project underway in Barnesley too. Could you give me a summary of what's being done there? Because I understand that the source of heat is different to that in the Islington project.
Yes. So Barnsley. And maybe taking a step back, the objective was, okay, we developed this system for Islington, for central London. Does it work in other cities in the UK? And Barnsley is so different. Is a let's say a more rural area. You have different heat sources. How could we apply the concept there? And we had really good engagement with the local authority there as well. So what we looked at was industry, because they have a lot of local industry where we could recover heat from. And the obvious one was a glass manufacturing facility. So they have a higher grade heat in the furnaces. And they have many different sources of heat. But we actually just looked at process water heat, which is they manufacture the glass bottles and then they need to cool them down, so they drop them in water, and that water is then collected into a lagoon. So it is like heat that they are really throwing down the drain. So we looked at recovering that heat. It wouldn't affect any of their processes. We don't need to do anything within the factory. We just need to recover the heat that goes into the lagoon. So, it's clear benefits. It doesn't affect their process, and we can recover large amounts of heat. So we looked at recovering the heat again into a heat network to supply the local buildings. Another thing that's great about this area is it has abandoned coal mines that have filled with water over time. So that's another source of heat. So we could recover heat from the mine water to heat the homes. But again, something we did that's a bit innovative there is, well, we only need we need heat mostly in the winter, but the glass factory is still producing heat in the summer. So why not store that heat in the mines and then recover it in the winter to supply the homes? So we did a bit of both, and the fact that we had these two heat sources gives a bit of resilience. Imagine the glass factory just moves on to a different location. Well, we still have the source there. And it also gives you, you can heat more homes because you have two sources. So it's really interesting to look at that. And the fact there was a lot of land area available in the area next to the glass factory, it means that we could introduce a solar farm or a wind farm, so we could produce a lot more renewable energy than you would be able to do in central London, because you are limited to the roofs of the buildings. While here you could use a much larger area. And adding electric vehicles is the same idea, that you just use the trenching for the heat network piping to add the electric vehicle cables. So we kind of proved that we could apply this concept there as well.
So this is all sounding theoretical. Is it going to be built? Is it going to be established as a solution in Barnsley?
I think so. It's early days, so we've done the feasibility study, but there is interest from the local authority to take this further. There's interest from energy companies to take this further. So I'll be really surprised if it doesn't go ahead. Probably what we always want is things to go ahead faster. That is always the challenge. But there's so much potential there that it's like you have all the ingredients to have a smart energy system. You have heat, you have power, or you can have power easily. So why not? Is almost like the question.
Yes, absolutely. So does this mean that other communities in former mining towns could potentially benefit from the same approach as what you've been investigating in Barnsley?
No, absolutely. I mean, if there is mine water, you can recover the heat from it. So again, why not? It's this untapped resource. And there is a lot of towns and cities that are, and the coal mining areas. So you have the source next to the demand is the ideal combination. Now is the issue is always with costs, I suppose, the cost of drilling, and there needs to be a lot of research into what's the best place to drill to make sure that you have enough of reservoir to recover all the heat that you need for the area. But it's definitely worth exploring, and this is actually, I think, is something that the coal authorities is becoming more and more interested in these types of projects, because they really see the potential.
Well, there are so many ex-mining communities across the UK, and there are often a lot of there's a lot of deprivation in those areas. I was born in Cornwall, and over the 80s, when I was growing up, the tin mines were being shut down. There was a huge amount of poverty, and with energy prices going up now, there's fuel poverty in a lot of these ex-mining communities. Is there any way that residents, councillors, local businesses could start the ball rolling to get similar schemes underway in their local area? For example, if somebody heard this podcast and thought, oh my goodness, we have mines, we know they're flooded, how can they start the process? What should they do?
This it's definitely should do a bit of research to estimate what's the heat potential, work out how many homes they want to heat. I mean, there's opportunities to look for funding within government for heat networks. So there is a big funding pot which is called the Green Heat Network Fund, which kind of funds 50%, I think, of a heat network cost, which is quite considerable. It can be a couple of millions. So I think the first step would always be to do a feasibility study. You need to have that research carried out. Need to look at what's the economic viability. Probably do a bit of a drill test just to make sure you're drilling in the right location. So it's true, it's complex, but the potential is there, so why not? And it can bring more employment into the local area. I mean, it's using a resource from a deprived area is bringing that a bit that proud of from the old days when they were exploring the mines. Well, now they can do the same, but in a reduced carbon way, in a more efficient way. So why not?
Yes, absolutely. So could they get in touch with the GreenSCIES project to find out about who locally could do the feasibility studies? Would there be a way to do that, to get in touch, to just get a bit of information, to get signposted to the right people to do that study?
No, absolutely. I mean, and we ourselves, we can do a lot of the feasibility studies as well. So one thing that works so well with the GreenSCIES consortium is that we enjoyed so much working together that even now that the project has ended, we created this Center of Excellence for Smart Local Energy Systems. So we have a website that describes all the work we can do, all the different partners, and is looking at heat mapping, developing business models, looking at the economic viability, looking at the smart controls, looking at doing the community engagement. So we can do all of that, and you can learn from our case studies, from other case studies that were funded through Innovate UK. So there is definitely the knowledge is there, and we definitely want to continue to work in this area.
Fantastic. So aside from money, because obviously money is a big issue here, what would make it easier to roll out projects like these across the country to accelerate our transition to net zero?
Yes, it's funny because in a way it can all come back to money, but one thing that's critical is to have the skills, because it is a complex system, and across, because you need to, the people that know about heating are not the same people that know about electric vehicles, or the people that know about renewable power. So is bringing the skills together. And there is a skills shortage across all these sectors, but it's in the heating side, heating and cooling, there is actually, as we roll out more heat pumps, there is not enough people to install them. That is a major issue. So we need to retrain people. So there's a big opportunity for that. I think if we tackle the skills shortage, that would be a major step forward. But then obviously there are other challenges. I mean, we're talking about electrifying heat, electrifying transport. So the grid is not ready for that, so it needs to be reinforced. So there needs to be, again, this is not about money, but at the same time,
Yes.
it's difficult not to come back to it, because you need to deploy the infrastructure, and of course you need money for that. But the skills, you could maybe with little capital investment, you can make such a big difference. You
Yes.
just need to train the people, maybe in a way make these areas more attractive, because you don't see, for instance, heating and cooling is just a sexy area to work on. But if you frame it as in, well, you're working on the solutions to solve climate change, then it suddenly becomes a lot more exciting. Is a bit how you frame it as an industry to bring more young people into it. So it's a
Yes.
bit about inspiring young people to join this area, but also retrain people from other areas, plumbers, electricians that can actually come and work installing heat pumps, but they need to acquire some skills. So
projects such as GreenSCIES and all of the work that you've been doing, they give me a huge sense of hope for the future. How hopeful are you that we will be able to change quickly enough to survive the climate change crisis?
So I'm hopeful because the technology exists. I mean, we know how to do it. We just need to accelerate the deployment. Need to make the grid carbon neutral. We need to reinforce it to allow the electrification. We also need to decarbonize the industry and aviation, and that will likely be using hydrogen as the fuel. So we need to ensure that we produce green hydrogen from renewable sources. But technology is evolving all the time. I mean, we might get more efficient batteries that are not so reliable on rare metals. Nuclear fusion might become viable in the near future. So we just need to keep investing in research and deployment of different technological options to ensure that we have viable business models, that all the stakeholders are engaged. So I'm hopeful. It's just maybe we know with the press, we are always getting this sense of urgency. And I think people have it. So it's just translating that into something real, into more research, into more deployment. But I'm hopeful we can do it, because it's not like we don't have the solutions. We do. We just need to implement them. Like,
Yes.
Imagine if you had a GreenSCIES system in every city around the world.
Yes, I am thinking that right now, and thinking, yes, that would be so much better than what we have now. Yeah, absolutely. So thinking more broadly, if you could change one thing in the world, what would it be and why? And it could be absolutely anything.
So I'm going to say, because you thinking more broadly, no boundaries. I'm going to say something really unpopular, because that's how I feel about it.
So, please do.
Yeah. So if I could change anything, it would be the rate that the world population is increasing, because we have strained resources in terms of energy, food, and water, because simply there is too many of us. I mean, just today was on the news that deforestation has increased since 2021. And that's when the world nations agreed at COP26 in Glasgow to reduce deforestation. And the opposite just happened. Land is being cleared to produce more crops and biofuels. And it can get a lot worse if the planet needs to feed more people. And of course, it's not a popular measure. How are you going to say to every single people on the planet that can only have one children? I mean, it's really difficult, but it's actually critical because it is so related to everyone's beliefs and religious beliefs as well. So and cultural beliefs. So it's very difficult to tackle, but is like the source root of the problems in a way, because ultimately climate change is a problem for the human race. It's not an issue for the planet. I mean, Earth is still going to be here even if we go extinct. So we
Yep,
need to
it'll just
solve the
keep on
problem.
going on.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, if you could invent anything, what would it be and why?
So this is where I really struggle because I really appreciate creativity, but I'm actually better at implementing ideas rather than coming up with them in the first place. So what would I invent? I mean, in a way, you kind of need renewable energy that is really green, that doesn't need a lot of energy to start off with. Like, for instance, you use solar panels, but you need a lot of energy to produce them. And it's the same with nearly all forms of energy. And fusion can potentially, nuclear fusion can give you unlimited energy, but you need to put so much energy into it just to get it started. So, but this is probably a physics problem. Maybe there's no exact solution for this. But you need renewable sources of energy in every country. I mean, energy underpins so much in terms of even security, safety, geopolitical influence is so critical. So
Mm.
anything related to these will have a bigger impact. But maybe with artificial intelligence, I know it's early days, but maybe artificial intelligence can come up with a solution for us. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it could do some good as well as all of the bad things that it will bring with it as well. But no, I'm sure it was. And AI has already enabled us to discover things in the medical field, ways that proteins are folded, all kinds of research, which is absolutely fantastic and has really beneficial impacts for us. So yeah, absolutely. Perhaps it will be able to lead us in a direction that we wouldn't have thought of because it will bring together so many different bits of information and put it together in a new way. Who knows? But yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed it will bring something good.
Yes,
Well,
into a brave new world.
it is a brave new world indeed. But that's all of my questions for today. Thank you so much for your time. The project is fascinating, and I think that one of the other big challenges of our time is to disseminate that information so that people aren't constantly reinventing the wheel. And that is definitely the legacy of the GreenSCIES research, of helping other people to be that much further along, having proven that it's possible.
Absolutely. And that's exactly, you sum it up so nicely, but that's the objective of the Center of Excellence, is to bring people along on the journey, signposting the direction, carrying the research, bringing the community together, really, because this is a relatively new community. People have worked more separately in the past within their own expertise. So it's so powerful what can be achieved when you bring people together, when you bring all that expertise centrally in
Absolutely.
one place. Yes. Excellent. Oh, thank you very much, Emma. Thanks for having me. It has been an interesting podcast.